I think that will mark a very pivotal moment in Lumix's history. It's combining a lot of the best. The flow or the kind of change between colors in the S1R2 reminds me of Arri. If the S1R is the only Lumix camera for another 5 years, I think any hybrid shooter would be happy for 5 years.
Back in 2019, Lumix released the S1R and S1H, which were cameras ahead of its time. But due to the lack of face detect autofocus and a little thing that happened called COVID, they were definitely a huge miss. Now in 2025, Lumix just released the brand new S1R Mark II, which in this podcast conversation, we're going to talk about, can this one camera replace both the original S1R and S1H? Now joining me today is a talented DP who's been using both the S1R and the S1H for the past 4 to 5 years. Asriel Yakinshaw. What's up, man?
What's up, man?
Did I get it right? Last name? Was it Yakshaw?
It's so close.
Yakshaw?
Super close. Asriel Yaksha.
Yaksha.
And then
I said yak.
You said yak. Yeah.
I wrote yak. I wrote YACK on my notes.
It's common. It's very common.
Now this is the first live podcast in the new studio space. Woo, this is my new studio. Woo. It's the second live podcast for the Lumix Creators podcast. So if you're listening to this right now, go over to the YouTube channel and you can hear what we're actually saying and see our beautiful faces. Asriel, can you tell me kind of, and let my audience know kind of who you are, kind of what you do and all that good stuff to see why we should even listen to you.
Why do people care? I mean, you don't need to listen to me, but I always consider myself a documentary filmmaker. Like that's kind of the dream, is to be in the doc space, specifically because I started as a freelance videographer back in early 2021. And primarily was doing product video. So specifically for a gourmet donut restaurant here in Southern California called Sidecar Donuts, and was filming donuts for them, and then eventually just kind of got tired of doing product video. Like they paid well and they were great people, but just wanted to kind of get into filming people, even get into like narrative commercial, because like people are involved. We get to see just interaction, human interaction. So yeah, I've kind of tried to go down the DP route in the documentary world, and been doing that now for the last 4-5 years. And I've been shooting on the S1H for that entire time.
Wow. So you've been shooting on the S1H, the S1R, past 4-5-ish years now. So I have a couple of warm-up questions that I like asking all my guests, which you've probably heard them before. What is the first Lumix camera I'm being introduced to that brand? And we'll start there.
First Lumix camera introduced, like when I was introduced to the brand.
Well, what's that first Lumix camera that you've been introduced, and then what's the first Lumix camera you've owned?
So the easy answer is the second one. The first Lumix camera I owned was the S1H.
Okay.
Got that June 2020. And the kind of shorter story behind that was kind of diving into the videographer world. Actually was in a metal band and really wanted to stay and make that a career as a drummer, and was like, okay, I need something else to bring income. And in college was in a photography class, was like, oh, cameras are really cool. Really love filming. I'm going to film weddings. And supposedly there's a lot of money in that. So like that was going to be my career, and watched many Matt Johnson videos on YouTube. Yep. Shout out to Matt Johnston.
Yeah. Cool
the
guy.
King of, have you met him?
Yeah.
Oh,
he was in Japan.
Oh, that's right.
Matt
For
Johnson.
the S9.
Yeah.
Love his channel. Love his YouTube content. And yeah, so back in like 2019, 2020, we had the A7 S2 and we had the GH5S. And those were like, at least at the time, for my memory,
GH5S.
GH5S. Okay. Yeah. That was kind of the like, if you're filming weddings, those are the two cameras that you're using. So I was kind of saving money. 2020 happens, COVID happens. Was able to get like stimulus checks, and kind of I was working at Guitar Center at the time. And so we shut down and I was able to file for disemployment. So just wasn't going to third wave coffee shops to spend all my money. So I saved money. And then that's when I heard about the S1H and was like, wait, I was either going to go Sony, dive into that route, or dive into the GH5S with micro four thirds, but then saw that the S1H was full frame. And the S1H was Netflix approved. Do a Netflix doc, try and get into that world. I'm like, sweet, I'm going to get the S1H, and was like, oh, 6K. Really didn't know much about like why you would use 6K, but I was like, it has 6K. The A7S2 has 4K. The 6K is probably better.
Yeah, it's bigger numbers.
Yeah, bigger number. So I'm going to get that one.
More Ks.
More Ks. So yeah, I saved up a little bit more and went to Sammy's camera in Santa Ana, like June 2020. Got the S1H. This could be me putting it in memory, but I'm pretty sure they were like, yeah, we've had this for a while. We haven't sold many of these. You're like the first person. So grabbed a S1H in 2020. And then from that point, the next 2 years doing kind of the product video for Sidecar Donuts was me just learning how to use this awesome camera. And like, honestly, even still to this day, I'm learning to pull better and better images out of it. Right. Like just through learning color grading, from learning different exposure techniques, from learning lighting. The firmware updates over the time the autofocus isn't great. The video that we shot today, it will be discussed in that. But image stabilization got better over time. They eventually added ProRes RAW, which I actually... Externally, yeah, to the Ninja V, which I actually do enjoy shooting with. I think there's a difference in the color. File sizes are huge. Because there's multiple things of like why I still love this camera. And despite many people saying, just go to Canon, go to Sony, I'm like, I still love this thing. Like, if you remember, one of the controversies of 2020, among many other things, was the R5 overheating. And this camera was already out. The A7 S1Rii came out. Everyone loved that. And then the R5 came out, and everyone's like, this shoots 8K 30, and it's like, it's going to rule everything. And then was the summer of overheating for Canon. Yeah. And I was sitting here with my giant fan built in to my camera, and this camera has never overheated once in the 6 years of me using it.
Which is an interesting fact. I think I've heard this somewhere, saying the S1R Mark II can shoot 8K, shoot 6K. There has been overheating problems. Yeah. We've experienced overheating, like the symbol, we didn't push it, or I haven't pushed it yet, but it's also the most stable camera that can shoot 8K with overheating. So it's a camera that can last the longest that's shooting 8K, which makes sense. Totally. This is like this tiny camera that's smaller than the S1H, shooting 8K, and it's still, you're able to probably get maybe like 15, 30, maybe 45 minutes, depending on your environment, without it overheating. And that's like in auto, not in like once you turn the fan on high, it might last longer. Yes. But also depends on a lot of variables, like having a cage on it probably produces more heat, HDMI produces more heat, we were running 32-bit flow. So I think that's a good point. When we were filming together on a pickleball commercial recently. And this camera, we were rolling 32-bit float, had an HDMI. We were semi-directly in the sun. We just had an 8x8 diffusing the camera and diffusing our talent. HDMI, 32-bit float, cage on the entire thing, directly in the sun. And we were getting this overheating symbol before firmware, around 7 to 8 minutes, I remember the symbol popped up. We were in 6K open gate.
We were in the 6.4 open gate.
6.4K open gate. Now with the firmware update, I've been doing the same scenario, and I've been getting it like probably maybe like 16, 18 minutes.
Sick. So
with the firmware up, that definitely helped. And that's with auto fan still, not on high. So that means it's theoretically on high should be better. And we are in a CF Express Type B card, which produces more heat. Now I'm on an SD card, and I have less issues.
Totally. And Gerald did some cool testing of like if you do USB-C, like screen off camera, and then a bunch of other things, you can actually get it to not overheat at all.
Yeah.
Because there's no internal heat.
Right.
And then also like to not fully cast shade on Canon, I know years after 2020 or a while after 20, they fixed a lot of the overheating issues in the original R5. And then I think the R5 II, there are some overheating comparable to this camera.
Right.
And then similar if you use their grip. And I think if you use the grip on this as well, there's some like, it fixes a lot of those things.
Yeah. So I think kind of starting to transition on to the conversation and topic of this episode. We went shooting today. Not crazy intensive shooting, but conversation of like doing the autofocus test between all three of these cameras, doing the image quality, which we haven't popped up, but from what we saw on the screen, what are kind of your initial thoughts between this one camera replacing both of these cameras now?
Been very excited and very expectant for a Mark II for a very long time now. I think maybe 2-3 years ago, I was like, okay, I would love better autofocus. I would love better stabilization.
Is this when S5 II and 2X? Because 2 years ago pits us at S5 II.
Yeah. When the S5 II and S5 2X, I think that will mark a very pivotal moment in Lumix's history of like jumping to phase detect autofocus, doing it at a price that's competitive at like whatever it is, like 2,300 somewhere in there, 2,200.
I think right now brand new it's 1,900.
Oh, yeah. Even better. Like, yeah, providing value, being competitive, and then now, like, I feel like all of these brands now are fighting and trading blows. Whereas years ago, let's say even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it was like Sony had great autofocus. The G5 was cool for weddings, and then you had a couple other things. But with all that to said, yeah, messing around with it today, messing around with the S1R2 a couple weeks ago on the pickleball shoot, I really do think it's combining a lot of the best of both of these two cameras, because we have the S1R here, original S1R here, and then we have the S1H here, and it's doing it without bringing over the weaknesses. Like, we even saw this today, spoiler alert, autofocus on the S1H sucks. It really does. And we'll leave some other interesting things for that video. But yeah, like contrast-based autofocus, I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, the original intent with that is there's something to be said of like the dynamic range is better if you're not doing...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure contrast-based autofocus, you theoretically get better dynamic range.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this is like 13 stops, 14 or so with dynamic range extension, but I believe S1H is 16.
Yeah,
can get to 16.
Totally. So I think it's the S1R2 is doing it without much sacrifice to dynamic range. But yeah, and this is my favorite fact to boast about Lumix, is that in 2020 when the S1H came out, the dynamic range test on Cine D was second to the Arri Alexa.
Yeah.
So this has, if I'm remembering, in 6K, base ISO 640 and Vlog, it's like 12.7 clean stops, but then a total of like 15 point something, or even 16, which is crazy. And I still kind of don't fully understand how they were able to pull all of that out of this sensor, because they haven't really used this sensor since. All the video qualities of this, they've absolutely brought over to the S1R2. And then the cool thing, and if you want, I can share the story of how I got the S1R.
Yes,
yeah. I had this. I had it for about 6 months, but doing all the product stuff that I was doing at the time was like, oh, I need something like a high resolution body to get good photos. Because this was doing good, but I'm like, I'd like something a little crisper, and just more like I can shoot videos and then be done, shoot photo, and not have to take off cages, move stuff around. So was interested in the S1R, and on a random day in March of 2021, went to Sammy's camera and was like, "Do you guys have an S1R?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we have one." I'm like, "How much is it?" Wondering if like it could be on sale or if I could haggle a little bit and try and get it. Because at the time, I believe it was like $3,200, maybe even more, like 30, somewhere between 32 and 37.
So yeah,
it was very
so
brand new.
Still
Still
around the 3,600, I think.
Could have been even right underneath $4,000. They ring it up 1,700.
Wow.
And I'm like, "Oh really? You have my attention." And I'm like, "Is that correct?" And they're like, "This is supposed to be like a few $1,000s more. Our manager isn't here. He's off right now. I'm going to call him." Calls manager in front of me. They talk for a little bit. And he hangs up and he's like, "Yep, manager told me to sell it to you at that. It looks like someone put a wrong price tag on this box."
So probably was 37.
It could have been $3,700. I don't know the exact number, but I bought it for somewhere around $1,900, $1,800
After tax and stuff?
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy. I was able to get an S1R.
Which is kind of wild to think about how the original S1H, the S1R was, 35 to $4,000. Meanwhile, this camera, how much more capable of a camera it is and coming around 33.
Oh, 100%.
But yes, it's like I say 3,300, like with it's just a number. But like I said, yes, I get that's a lot of money. But relatively speaking, you think about 5 years ago, you think about how inflation, you would assume this camera would be around $5,000, which with what it's capable of and what competitors are doing right now is in probably closer to that range. I think like the FX3, I don't know what the ZA is, but it's like probably closer to that $4,000 mark. So easily this could have been priced up. But the fact that LUMIX, like, now we're going to give you value, and it's like, say brand new, the S5 2X, I think was 2,200-ish. So say 2,200, so like a little bit, $1,100 more. Wow. And you're getting 8K, you're getting sort of no crop on anything.
Yeah.
You're getting like amazing 44 megapixel photos. Like you're getting everything. I think the cool part about this, which I think we can like show off too here,
totally,
is the S1R Mark II, and I'll probably throw some footage on screen right now, is almost like the body design of both the S1R and the S1H kind of put together in one single package. We have the flip out screen similar to the S1R, but we also have the flip up and the flip sideways. The S1H, you can flip up and that's it. And then you can also flip sideways, which is Asriel is showing off right now. But meanwhile, the S1R, you can flip it out and down, but for whatever reason, instead of flipping it, the way to kind of do the selfie flip, they did it the other way, which makes sense if you're taking photos like this. It's a photography camera at the end of the day. Physical designs, what do you like about this camera more than the S1R and the S1H? And then what do you like about the S1H or the S1R over the original S1 or over the new S1R Mark II? Totally.
Yeah. So like difference between ergonomics and I have large hands, and that was even something, a reason I loved my S1H is that I would mess with an A7S or just any Sony camera and it just felt small in my hands. Yeah. Played around with the R5, that was close. I enjoyed it, but getting to hold something just large that it didn't feel like I only had to use 3 fingers to hold on to it. So when I heard that the S1R2 was a little smaller, little concerned, but even just you and I were talking about this earlier, feeling it in my hands, it actually feels great. It's lighter, which for the dock stuff that I do will be nice. Less weight running around for a 12-hour day is always nice. So I think the ergonomics are great. We were even talking about the difference between the on-off button, shutter dial, or just front dial. And then this totally feels better. And I do love, this is like how the
I think it might be
lever
locked.
is on the outside here for
Yeah.
the photo video S and Q, and then the on off button is on the back here. It just like this is where my hands would be
Right.
if I was using this camera. And I think Lumix put thought into like even like when I think of like an Xbox controller or a PlayStation 5 controller, it's like they put thought into what ergonomically where my fingers would go if I'm not even looking at the camera. So I think they've put a lot in thought. Love that the front record button of the S1H made its way to the S1R too. That's awesome. And then we were also talking about this earlier too. Love that they put the closing shutter in the S1R too. That was a feature I didn't think would come to Lumix, but really wanted. Run and gun areas, filming something for a doc, like the feature doc I'm working on right now, we were actually in a farm at one point, and I had to switch lenses, and I would have just felt safer knowing like, okay, take off lens, shutters closed, put new lens on.
Right.
We're okay.
Yeah.
The geese and the pigs around me are not going to touch this sensor in any way.
What media is the S1H? Is that 2 SD cards?
Oh, in terms of like SD, yeah. So it's just 2 SD cards. I think you really do need V90s for the S1H.
Yeah.
But the S1R, the original, I think is the same. So it is. But it's just smaller.
Right.
They just kind of displaced it a little bit.
Right.
So yeah, original S1R is your
CF Express Type B card.
CF Express Type B card and an SD, similar to the S1R2. A big thing for the S1R starting there. Loved the high resolution photos. Took this camera to Chicago. Got to take some beautiful landscape photos, and actually used the high resolution mode a good amount. The bummer was you could only use this on a tripod. I tried it. You
can do this handheld.
I tried it multiple times using that handheld, and it would just look shaky. So the fact that now you can do it handheld, but it's also high resolution, I think is a huge win. But the big bummer about the S1R is the video capabilities just weren't there. They eventually brought 5K 10-bit in a firmware update a couple years after, I believe. But the only thing you could really do was 4K 8-bit at the time. Didn't have Vlog or Vlog Lite. It had HLG only in that 5K mode. So the times I've brought it like on a vacation, wanted to do some landscape photography, but also wanted to do some video, it was always sacrificing, and it felt like there was a very divided line between the S1R and the S1H. So to move on to the S1H, the fact that the S1R2 now has 4K 60 uncropped, it's like a 1.1 crop, right? Something like that. I'm okay with that. And then 4K 120. That was something when A7 S3, FX3, FX6, and the R5, R5 II had 4K 120. I was like, for really cool, like ultra slow motion in kind of like a chef's table docu-series thing that's like some of my most favorite footage. I really wanted 4K 120. So I'm really happy that's coming. I think the S1H just came out a little before it was possible. Right. Kind of right on that cusp. So love that. I also love the doc that I mentioned earlier that I've been working on. We shot that in 4:3 mode on the S1H, but it only went up to 48 frames a second, which was cool, and I used it a lot, but I would have loved 60 frames per second for to hold and kind of slow down some of the pacing in the documentary. And the S1R2 now has 4:3 60 frames per second, which I'm very excited about.
But I definitely feel like the S1R and the S1H, like you said, hard divided line. If you wanted like video and like better video specs, you're going to grab the S1H. You wanted higher quality photos, you're going to grab the S1R. I feel like right now the S1R Mark II kind of takes these two cameras, merges them into one, ton more features and specs and like capabilities. Of course, I know there's been a lot of people talking about overheating, the rolling shutter. I think the rolling shutter conversation is a whole nother conversation in itself. I don't even think it's that big of a deal, in all honesty. I think as long as you're taking care of your shots and making sure how you shoot is specific, and as long as you're not doing whip pans, and honestly panning from cars, depending how quick you're going, you can probably get a pretty decent shot. A couple more questions for you before we get into the last question. We kind of shot on all three of these cameras today. Image quality wise, we haven't saw this on the laptop yet, so from what we've seen so far, what do you think of the image, of the difference between these cameras? Obviously this camera I think is kind of an outlier, so we can ignore this because it only shoots hybrid log gamma.
Yeah, totally.
These are at least in 10-bit vlog on both of these.
Yeah, so between these cameras, the S1H and the S1R2, and you told me this, we were talking about this, the guy who did a YouTube video of the S1R2 and the FX3. Yeah. Can't remember his name.
Gary.
Yeah. I noticed this past couple of weeks of like, there is an interesting difference in the color science of the S1R2, I think, from the previous cameras. I think it's close to the S52X and S52. But it looks like they're progressing in their color science, which I think is really cool. And what I noticed, the flow or the kind of change between colors in the S1R2 reminds me of Arri. It reminds me of like, there's a soft transition between blues and reds and greens. It's not hard, which in that video compressed on YouTube that I saw, the S1R2 and the FX3, like the FX3 looked like, oh, this is the red section. We stop, we move to the green section. We move to the blue colors, whatever. This could also just be my eyes, but that's what I saw. So I think I've noticed that on the S1R2. The S1H does have a low pass filter, which does make it look maybe a little more organic, gets rid of moire in textures, of course. So I think that's still there. I think that's still a positive win for the S1H still in 2025. So I think that helps, but I have caught myself wanting to sharpen the footage sometimes, especially if I didn't really nail focus. I think you're penalized a little bit more because of that low pass filter. So, I mean, I think off the bat, because that's not there in the S1R2, the S1R2 did look sharper. And I was a little bit weary of, because it doesn't have a low pass filter, will it look a little bit more digital-ish? Which maybe it does. I haven't gotten a chance to color grade anything from the S1R2 yet. But honestly, looking at it in camera, I'm not seeing that, and I'm not super concerned once I do like get one for myself that it's gonna look super digital.
But I was fascinated to see that for the first time when I've done GH7 versus GH6, I've always thought the GH6 image looks better than the GH7 due to the contrast-based sensor versus the phase detective sensor. From what we saw on camera, I felt like the S1H, it didn't look bad, but I felt like the S1R Mark II looked better. And this is like the first time where I'm like, oh, a LUMIX phase detect looks better than what the original contrast-based camera.
Totally agree.
And of course it should. Being 6 years of a difference. I know the GH6 and GH7 I think was 1.5 to 2 years of a difference, but still with that difference, the contrast-based GH6 looks better. In this case scenario, I would say the S1R Mark II looks better. So I am curious, last two questions before we get into the final last question. First one, I feel like this is a simple yes and no. Do you think the S1R Mark II replaced both the S1R and the S1R or S1H?
Yeah, I think it does in a lot of ways. I think it improves upon we get the stills that are from this camera, and we get the epic video features from this camera. So I think it does, honestly, it replaces these. I think there's still room, but I think we're going to get to that for other things to come. But like, and I don't think they'll do this because like, I don't think they're going to do this, but if we didn't get another camera for 5 years, like I got this in June 2020, it's now 2025, spring-ish. If the S1R is the only Lumix camera for another 5 years, I think any hybrid shooter would be happy for 5 years, let alone like what they're going to update with firmware.
This is technically only replacing this camera.
Yeah, totally. But
there's
then,
still the S1 and S1H, which we'll touch point on.
Totally. So those things could come out. We're going to talk about that. But for now, in March of 2020, get the S1R2, and the stuff you love, if you've messed with these two cameras at all, will be there.
Yeah. Now, I do have one more question before we get to the last final question. Do you think people should buy the S1R/H used right now over the S5
Oh, that's a great question.
Because the S5 is coming in at $2,000-ish. It has the same video specs as the original S1H. It's definitely more sharper and as of a natural colors like the S1R. I would say it's a little bit more green, and like a little bit more of a magenta cool shift. So it's definitely more color shifted, but you're getting face detect autofocus, you're getting the LUMIX Lab app, you're getting more firmware updates, frame.io, proxies, $1,900. But these cameras are now almost like $1,400, $1,500. So what do you think? Should someone thinking about buying a contrast-based autofocus camera in 2025 from LUMIX or S5 II/2X?
Great question. And I did try and look it up on OfferUp, but Wi-Fi wasn't working, or reception wasn't working. I don't know if you can. Well, I have some ideas. Yeah. Oh, used. Cost. Yeah, for cost. I don't like. If this is $2,000,
this is $1,600, and that's like $2,000 right now, from what my notes say.
Probably get the S5 too. I would go there, but it also kind of depends. When I got this camera, like, I got into it knowing the autofocus wasn't going to be good.
Right. And
with that was like, sweet, I'm going to learn how to primarily shoot manual. And when I first got it, I had some Canon L series glass that I was adapting. And with those, you only got single autofocus. You didn't get continuous. So I just used manual for a long time. I saw this as like, cool, this is a cinema camera that I'm going to adapt. It's just smaller. And I'm going to put Cooks on it, or Canon Cine E glass. If you can get it cheaper, cool, and then go into it knowing you're going to put PL glass on it, or you're going to only use you're only going to have it in an interview and no one's going to move or run at the camera. Not an inch. Get the S1H. I think the S1R in some ways, if you can get it really cheap and you're using it for photography,
what
landscape.
megapixel is it?
Huh?
What megapixel is
It's 48, I believe.
Oh, wow.
So it's a little bit higher than the S1R2.
Yeah.
And it has the landscape mode. So like, you're going to do kind of portrait photography. My wife uses it for portrait photography today, and she loves it. So like, I think if you're a photographer who wants a high resolution camera, there's still value here, and especially if you can get it for $1,500, I think that's actually a really good value. But yeah, you're not gonna shoot sports on the original S1R. No. You're gonna move over a little bit, take photo. Like, that's what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
So
before we get into the last and final question, Asriel, where can people check you out, and where do you want people to send these lovely people to?
Probably Instagram. My name, Asriel Yaksha, at Asriel Yaksha. True story. But then I have a YouTube channel also, Asriel Yaksha. But then my company right now that I kind of do work under, production company, is called Chaos and Function. And you can go to the website chaosandfunction.com. You'll find my work. And then soon-ish this year, feature documentary will be released
Big
that
stuff.
I directed, produced, filmed, and edited.
All on the S1H.
All on the S1H.
As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the S1R Mark II was the replacement for the original S1R. Lumix still has kind of two more cameras, the S1H and the original S1. I guess we can dive more into the S1H. What do you kind of want to see design-wise, spec-wise? What do you want to see for an S1H Mark II, especially since this kind of fills the void of being that hybrid video photo camera right now for that and this camera? What do you want to see for that camera H2 Mark upgrade?
Like in a lot of ways, like this was made as like a hybrid, but more like 24 megapixels, shoots good photos, but then does amazing video. But yeah, in a Mark II of this, I think it'd be really cool to get like a stacked sensor, low rolling shutter, 6K 60 would be great. I think it would be cool for them to sit in the, like, see what they can do with 6K. A resolution that a lot of people love. The file sizes aren't as huge as 8K. You can even be a little more organic because you're not getting super, it's like ultra sharp with 8K footage like 8 can be. So yeah, push to 6K 120 in terms of like resolutions, but then would love to see a lot of options with ProRes RAW and internal RAW. We've kind of been limited to here, over HDMI, you have a 5.9K 30, a 5.9K 24, and then a cropped 4K 60, 30, 24. And I'd love to see more options there. Would love to see Arri Log C4 with, there's a lot, of course, with Arri and their color science, and then of course there's sensors and how they're processing all that information. But specifically within Arri Log C4, I believe there is an extra stop of dynamic range just in that profile itself, with how they're doing it. So would love to see that in a Mark II of the S1H. I'm excited for 32-bit float. I would be very curious, and I think Lumix, I could totally see them being the first for this, but internal ND. I think that would be huge.
So then here's my question for you. Internal NDs, but you don't get IBIS, or would you want IBIS over internal NDs? If you only had to choose one.
If I only had to choose one, and like, it's not like this version of the camera has it, and this version of the camera.
I think that would be the best case
scenario. It would
scenario.
be great, because then people can pick.
I still think the best case scenario is that they lock the sensor physically, and that's when internal NDs works on the camera. So you have internal NDs, however, you lose your IBIS during it, but that's fine. Then you can also like kind of, that fits both camps, and it's like, great, so I have internal NDs, you just don't have IBIS. Or you turn off your internal NDs, and then you get IBIS, and your sensor's unlocked. I think that's what they should do in a boxed design.
Totally. If the engineers can figure that out, I think that'd be great. I think as I'm moving towards higher budgets, higher productions, where it's like, actually, to make it less risky, I'm going to rent a Ronin 2. To make it less risky, I'm going to kind of like rent the gear around the camera to actually, I'm going to rent a Dana Dolly. Like, I'm going to have great stabilization in those ways. Yeah. If I'm going towards the productions where those kind of things are accessible, I would actually prefer ND. And I think even just being able to, push a button, NDs are there. But I could also see that just kind of going into hopefully a box version of the camera that's eventually made. Yeah. But I think more and more people just kind of in the YouTube space and in the filmmaking space are wanting a camera in this size, if not a little smaller, to have indies in it. And if that's, because I know there's a lot of stuff where it's like with image stabilization, the sensor's moving. So
Right, the
if
sensor's physically moving, so you
and
would
it's
need
not like held there.
right for an electronic, because that's what technically is an electronic variable ND, which has a chemical reaction on how it's making your ND change, or I think it's like a crystallization is the correct word. I could be totally wrong, but the way that works, they would still need that physical piece of mechanics to move with a sensor same time. So what that causes is way more issues. That's why I think if they're able to hit a box design, figure out some way where someone can hold their camera, turn off the sensor IBIS physically, so it physically grabs the sensor, locks it, and like locks it in a place where someone can hold their camera and it locks like this. Lock it in place where someone holds their camera and it locks it like this. When it's set down, it locks it like that. Then you have internal NDs right then. And I think that's the way an answer. And if that takes 2 years, I think it's worth it. The faster route is to make 2 cameras. I think the S1H Mark II, and you can have the Mark II both be in box cameras. One has IBIS, and then maybe the Mark II X doesn't have IBIS, but you have internal NDs.
Yeah.
I think that's a faster solution, but it might, I don't know. Faster solution might cost more money because you have 2 different cameras coming out with 2 different designs.
Totally.
Or 2 different hardware differences on the inside.
Yeah.
The smarter solution, I think, is having the IBIS be physically turned off if internal NDs and IBIS is not possible for the level that LUMIX is known for their IBIS.
Totally.
Because I don't think they would want the IBIS to be like, they have IBIS, but the IBIS kind of isn't that great.
It's not. No.
They would want it to be like gimbal IBIS.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, even speaking of that, I know I haven't experienced this, but maybe I'm also not knowing what I'm looking for. I know when you put a camera with IBIS on a gimbal, it's like say I threw this on the Ronin 2, because the sensor isn't fully locked, there might be some movement with it, even though it's on a gimbal.
Right.
So even having the ability to lock it for gimbal work would even be great.
Even car mounts, doing all that stuff. There's a ton of advantage to locking the physical sensor in place. And if being able to do that mechanically speaking would be amazing.
I think the last thing for me with an S1H Mark II, I would love to see the same competition in dynamic range as this had when it came out. In the sense of like, this came out in total, not usable of course, but in total had 15, 16 stops of total dynamic range. I would love the next camera to have somewhere in that 16 to 17, like be competitive in that way of like it's competing with like an R5 II that I know in certain modes, not their raw, because their raw is a little noisy, but they're like 13 to 16. They're in that range, like getting it to the point of, okay, like we're pushing dynamic range, which has always been a high value of LUMIX. Like a lot of their cameras have pushed dynamic range and maybe even sacrificed other things.
Yeah. And I think if LUMIX just dominates the creator market for YouTubers, content creators like that with the current cameras, which I feel like they are now, and then dominate that, let's call it that $10,000 like budget, like $5,000 to $10,000 budget projects for prosumers, I don't know if their cameras make sense, but that's a good reason why they've been partnering up, or licensing technically is the correct word, with Arri. So hopefully that comes over to their cameras, and then it's like, now it's a smooth transition. If you do want to get into $20,000, $50,000 projects, you have a LUMIX camera that has the color science of Arri, potentially maybe the C4. And then, once you rent that Arri camera, you're already used to that color workflow. And
totally. Presets you've made in DaVinci for your S1H2.
Because, you get to the point when I think if LUMIX compete for the S1H Mark II, they need to compete with the FX3 and FX6.
100%.
If they figure out how to compete with those 2 cameras, they've nailed that market. And then the next upgrade, in reality, after you get past that and you're like, I need another camera, at that point, you're probably looking at $20,000 cameras. You're not looking at like a $8,000 camera at that point, because you're like, well, that only gets me a little bit more. You're at that point, you're thinking about, I want way more. And that's when you're going to end up probably going to the Arri route or Sony Brano.
LUMIX. You want to make a
You want to make a lot of
LUMIX
money?
Red Raptor? make a box camera, Panasonic LUMIX. Yeah, bring back the Varicam 0.2 that's 20 grand but competes with a Red Raptor. I'll pre-order it now.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Asriel, for joining me on this podcast conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the first one live.
Yes.
In the new studio. I'm very excited for that.
Anyways, if you guys want to check out another video where we're comparing the S1R Mark II against the S1H and the S1R, you can check out that video right there. YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Until next one, guys. Peace.